Our nation celebrates its 250th birthday this week, so I thought, how about an episode based on what-ifs of history? Now, this is from a series I'm doing on my Shorts feed on YouTube and at TikTok, both of which you can find at Delta Safari Show. But I put them all together here in case you want to play them in the background while you're making succotash or something. A little insight into how I came up with the answers to these is basically I posed the question to a number of AI engines, and they drew from historical prognostications that are published on the internet and compiled them, and it's all a bunch of mumbo jumbo. Here, let's take a look. I'm your host, Stu Donald. Let's head to the Delta. What if one of the boldest land deals in history never happened? The year is 1803. Thomas Jefferson pen hovers, but this time, it never signs the Louisiana Purchase. America's dreams of westward expansion halted. The Mississippi River becomes more than a boundary, it's a barrier to destiny. France holds tight to the vast Louisiana territory, stretching from New Orleans to the Rockies, and suddenly the balance of power in North America tips. Britain dominates the north, Spain tightens its grip on the southwest, and Napoleon, seeing opportunity, keeps a foothold in the heart of the New World. The United States, boxed in, struggles to breathe. No port of New Orleans, no prairie frontier, no trail of tears, no manifest destiny. Trade dries up, the economy stagnates, and war, it's not a matter of if, but when. Perhaps it's 1815. American troops clash with French garrisons in the swamps outside New Orleans. A different war, a different outcome, and maybe a different America. But this shift also echoes across the plains. With no American surge westward, native nations like the Osage, Lakota, and Comanche hold ground, forging fragile alliances with European powers, rewriting the fate of the heartland. A slower-moving frontier preserves more than culture. It spares entire ecosystems from the plow and rail. No Louisiana Purchase means no Kansas, no Montana, no Missouri, and perhaps no United States as we know it. History often hinges on a single decision, but in this world, that decision was never made. What if Mobile had remained the capital of Louisiana? Considering it was already home to Creole cuisine, French architecture, and the birthplace of American Mardi Gras, its long-term influence might have been even greater. With its existing Creole traditions, Mobile likely would have cemented itself as the cultural heart of French Louisiana, overshadowing New Orleans in influence. Mobile's location on the Gulf would have fostered trade routes connecting the Caribbean, Europe, and the Mississippi River, potentially making it an even larger economic hub than it already became. Instead of Louisiana becoming defined by New Orleans' dominance, Mobile's continued role as capital might have altered boundary divisions, leading Alabama and Mississippi to retain stronger French ties rather than transitioning fully into British and later American governance. Rather than New Orleans taking center stage as the Creole cultural icon, Mobile would have remained the primary influence, continuing to spread its architectural and culinary traditions across the Gulf South. Given that Mobile had Mardi Gras celebrations long before New Orleans, its prominence as capital might have made its version the dominant and most widely recognized celebration, possibly reshaping how carnival traditions evolved across the Americas. If Mobile had remained the capital, French-style urban planning might have expanded in Alabama, influencing the city's layout in ways that mirror New Orleans' Vieux Carré instead of shifting towards later British and American designs. Had Mobile stayed the capital, Louisiana's territorial history might have looked drastically different, perhaps remaining more focused on Gulf expansion rather than developing New Orleans as a Mississippi-centric port. Mobile might have become the focal point for Louisiana's cultural expansion, ensuring that Creole traditions spread further into Alabama rather than being consolidated primarily on the Gulf Coast. Without the capital shift, New Orleans might not have emerged as a dominant Gulf South city. Instead, it may have remained a secondary trade town rather than becoming the symbol of Louisiana's French history. This alternative timeline raises compelling questions. If Mobile had remained the capital, Louisiana's identity might have been entirely different, with Mobile at the center of Creole history rather than New Orleans. What effect do you think this would have had on the creation and evolution of jazz? What if the South had won the Battle of Mobile Bay? It's an intriguing scenario. The Battle of Mobile Bay in 1864 was a crucial Union victory, tightening the blockade on the Confederacy and securing control of a major southern port. If the South had won, several key outcomes might have changed. Most importantly, would we still have the famous quote, "Down the torpedoes, full speed ahead"? That was my favorite historical quote as a child because I got to say damn without getting smacked. A Confederate victory could have allowed them to maintain control of Mobile Bay, keeping an important trade route open. This would have made it easier for the South to receive supplies, possibly prolonging the war. The Union strategy relied heavily on cutting off southern ports. A Confederate victory could have undermined this plan, making it harder for the North to choke off resources. By mid-1864, the war was dragging on, and Northern morale was shaky. If the Confederacy had won Mobile Bay, it might have bolstered Southern spirits and weakened Abraham Lincoln's re-election prospects. A different political outcome could have affected negotiations and even the terms of surrender at the end of the war. While a Southern victory in Mobile Bay might have altered the timeline of the war, it's unlikely to have changed the ultimate outcome. The Union still had superior resources, manpower, and industrial strength. But if Mobile remained in Confederate hands, the war might have dragged on, and reconstruction efforts could have played out much differently. It's fascinating to think about how single battles could shift the course of history. Do you see any other possibilities in this alternative timeline? What if the coastal counties of Mississippi, Alabama, and the Florida Panhandle broke away to form their own state? That's an intriguing idea, and one that has actually been attempted before. So what things might unfold? Well, first is the economic impact. The new state would likely have a strong economy centered around tourism, seafood industry, shipping, and military bases. With major ports like Mobile and Pensacola, it could establish itself as a trade hub. Next, the political landscape would change. The formation of a new state would shift political representation in Congress. The remaining parts of Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida would lose congressional seats and electoral votes, while the new state would gain them. Depending on demographics, it could lean conservative, moderate, or even create a unique political identity centered on the philosophies of Jimmy Buffett. This area shares deep Southern traditions but has a distinct coastal influence, including Cajun, Creole, and maritime cultures. It would most certainly develop a unique state identity, emphasizing its Gulf Coast heritage. Infrastructure challenges would be a huge task. The newly formed state would need to establish its own government, law enforcement, education system, and taxation policies. Coordination of resources, especially like hurricane preparedness and emergency response, would be crucial. Now, for sure, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida would not respond well to losing their Gulf Coast regions. Losing major ports and coastal tourism would be a significant economic and strategic setback, possibly sparking political disputes. In Alabama, for instance, 70% of the state's entire operating budget is supplied by just Mobile and Baldwin counties. The other 30% is divided among the remaining 65 counties. So you can see why the folks there might want to get the heck out of Dodge. So what's a good name for the fictional new state? Gulfland? Costalia? You know, this area had a name before Europeans arrived. The natives called it Amigeaux. What would you name it? What if Pushmataha had joined Tecumseh's coalition? Pushmataha, the famed Choctaw chief, was known for his diplomacy and his alliance with the United States, while Tecumseh, the Shawnee leader, fiercely resisted American expansion and sought to unite indigenous nations against it. If Pushmataha had sided with Tecumseh, the native Confederacy would have gained significant strength. The Choctaw were skilled warriors, and their alliance would have broadened Tecumseh's coalition, giving him greater numbers and resources. It is likely that the Chickasaw, Cherokee, and Lower Creeks would have followed suit. It's possible that this strengthened resistance could have delayed or altered the outcome of the War of 1812, potentially forcing the U.S. to negotiate more favorable terms for indigenous nations. With such allies, the Red Stick Creek would likely have defeated Andrew Jackson at the Battle of Horseshoe Bend. No Horseshoe Bend, no Battle of New Orleans. No Battle of New Orleans, no Trail of Tears. It's nice to think about. However, Pushmataha's decision to remain loyal to the U.S. meant that the native groups were divided, ultimately weakening Tecumseh's movement. A trick the Americans had learned from their foes in England. Divide and conquer was how a small island with horrible dental hygiene became an empire. Even with additional support, Tecumseh still would have faced enormous odds against a powerful and expanding U.S. military presence. A unified native front might have changed some battles, but whether it would have stopped westward expansion entirely is uncertain. It's a compelling alternate history to imagine, though. What do you think? Would this alliance have turned the tide in Tecumseh's favor?
Hey, y'all. Stu wanted me to ask you, he wanted you to hit the like and subscribe buttons. That's not that hard. It's not like you need a really bendy back for that. Just hit the like and subscribe buttons and we'll all be good.